Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Freitag, and I am currently serving as Academic Senate President here at DVC. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our first presentation of the 2021 Faculty Lecturer. We very much appreciate you joining us today. In their proposal, this year's Faculty Lecturer wrote, "Free enterprise capitalism is the most powerful system for social cooperation and human progress ever conceived. It is one of the most compelling ideas we humans have ever had, but we can aspire to even more." This message really resonated with the Academic Senate Council, who selected DVC Professor of Business Administration, Eric Moss, as this year's Faculty Lecturer. On behalf of the entire Senate Council, congratulations, Eric. During the presentation, please have your smart devices ready. Eric is going to tell you exactly what to do with those in just a couple minutes. And please hold your questions. We hope to have a few minutes afterwards to answer your questions. First, let me tell you a little bit about Professor Moss. Eric teaches business statistics, business ethics, introduction to business marketing, international business management, email marketing, and search marketing. Eric also supports student success as one of 3 faculty advisors for DVC Phi Beta Lambda, facilitator of the DVC Mindfulness community, and one of the training leads for faculty as they transition from in-person to online education back in spring. Outside of DVC, Eric is the husband of Kathy, a palliative care nurse, father of 3 sons and 2 bonus sons, grandfather of 1.95 granddaughters and 1 grandson, and a founding member of the East Bay chapter of Conscious Capitalism. And citizen teacher volunteer with Citizen Schools to middle school students in Oakland Unified School District. Eric holds a bachelor's degree in management science from Carnegie Mellon University and an MBA from UCLA in marketing and arts management. And he is our 57th Academic Senate Faculty Lecturer. Everyone, please welcome Professor Eric Moss.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. And following the Oscars on Sunday, there are a lot of people that I do have to thank for bringing us all to this moment and allowing me to not only find myself, but also to express myself. And among those people that I must thank before we go any further, are the students of DVC, without whose inspiration they give us so much energy, and this is why we're all here. Our department, the Business Administration Department, I affectionately refer to them as bad assets. They are each and every one assets to students, the school, the department. Above all, I also want to thank Martha Layham, as well as Carolyn Seifer. Martha is our department chair, and Carolyn is our eagle-eyed editor that makes sure that the things that we say are properly expressed, both punctually as well as tenses, getting matches between subject and predicate, all those kinds of good things. The Academic Senate, the DVC leadership of the administration that not only makes this possible, but it has allowed me to bring forward the DVC mindfulness community to students as well as faculty using assets from Wisdom Labs. And by the way, we are going to use the Wise at Work app, which everyone at DVC has access into. Certainly my family, my wife, of course, without her, I would certainly not be here. She is my inspiration and my muse. Sons, brothers, parents, all of them. But I would be remiss if I also didn't thank my teachers. And my teachers, I include not only everyone with whom I've worked, but especially those that have both hired me and fired me. Some of those marvelous teachers include Mr. Murphy from my 10th grade geometry, Norm Johnson, who was the professor for the most valuable class I ever had. And among them also beyond that are the conscious capitalism thought leaders, conscious business thought leaders. Some of those include Steve Havel and Frank Conley, who were kind enough to come and lecture as guest lecturers to the very first business ethics course that I was having the privilege of leading. And they were the ones that introduced me to the whole concepts of conscious business, conscious capitalism, and gave me essentially the second greatest day in a person's life. I think it was Seneca who said that there are two great days in a person's life: the day they're born and the day they discover why. So without that, and with no further ado, let me talk about what we're going to be doing. This topic is, in fact, mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism, a formula for recovery, not only economically, but socially. We're going to start off with an interactive activity, an arriving practice, following up where I'm going to talk about, learn a little bit more about you folks. And again, that's going to be through the interactive app that you should have access to if you have hit the QR code, holding your camera, opening your camera and focusing it on that little funny little square. Don't need to take a picture, but you should see a little window that comes up that says, do you really want to join this site? The answer is yes, you do. So it should take you right there. We're going to describe what I mean by mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism as frameworks, and going to explore how they're applied in a business context, and also how they're applied here at DVC. And then at the end, we're going to have some Q&A if time permits. So having said that, sit back, relax, and here's our meeting starter.
This 2-minute practice is designed to get everyone in the room clear on their desired intention for the meeting, making it more efficient and productive. I invite you to participate to the extent that you feel comfortable. And feel free to just listen or write down some notes as you go along. Allow your eyes to softly focus, either looking down at 45 degrees or out of a window if you would like. And let's start by taking a deep breath in and out. Now bring to mind the topic or the reason for this meeting. And what do you want to get out of this time? What do you want to accomplish? Pause for a moment and see what arises. Are there specific questions that need answers? Do you want to brainstorm ideas? Or are you here to hear what others have to say? Bring to mind 2 specific things that you want to accomplish by the end of the meeting. And next, ask yourself, how do you want to show up in the meeting? And how do you want to support your colleagues or teammates? Again, notice what comes up for you. At any time in the meeting, feel free to check in with your intentions for this time and be curious about how you could bring them more forward. Allow your eyes to fully open, and let's finish this practice by taking a deep breath in and out.
Well, now that we have kind of warmed up our brains, got us in a nice state to have a wonderful meeting, let's warm up our technology. So what you should be seeing on your smart device is, in fact, this question: what is your favorite type of music, artist, or group? And if you go ahead and type in like jazz, oh, wonderful. And if somebody else thinks that jazz is a wonderful, their favorite, go ahead and type that in, and that will make that word larger. We have a lot of interesting musicians out there. CSNY, isn't that City College of the State of New York? No. And you can in fact participate in more than once in this particular word cloud. Well, looks like we're all set on our technology. So you know a little bit about me, but let me ask you a few questions about you. And again, on your smart device, what is your relationship with DVC? Are you a student, part of the administration, part of the classified, alumni or retiree, or a member of the faculty? So we'll give you a few minutes just to kind of look at that. Let's see, we have 36 folks here. You can only vote once, or at least if I did this right. This is, Murphy was an optimist. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time. Yeah, this is technology, so some strange things may happen. So go ahead and get your votes in. And while we're doing that, I also want to recognize a few other folks in the conscious thought leaders that I did not mention. Amongst those are Bob Chapman. He is the CEO of Barry Waymiller. Thomas Eckschmidt. He, along with Raj Sisodia and a couple of other folks, wrote the Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, and that's an accompaniment to the book called Conscious Capitalism by John Mackey. It is my intent to publish a reading list for those folks that are interested, but also a lot of the information that we're going to be covering and that has influenced me has come from people like Fred Kaufman, Simon Sinek, Raj Sisodia, Matt Waite from Chapman and Company, Leadership Institute, and just a whole host of other wonderful folks out there. So now that we know a little bit about your relationship with DVC, let's dig it back into that dim, dark past for some of you. And what is or was your undergraduate college major? So is it the STEM, humanities, social sciences, business, other, or perhaps you didn't attend college? And get those cards and letters coming in. The votes are coming in. The Academy is in tune. Yes, I was just reminded by my friend Milton Clark from LMC, and I also thank you, Milton, because I also have to thank the members of the United Faculty Board. They have been so supportive and really an inspiration that we have a wonderful community, not only within this particular college, but across the entire community college district. So now that we know who we are, we've gotten settled. This topic is in fact about mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism. And it is all about these concepts as a formula for recovery. So I'd like to see how you currently see these concepts in terms of the overlaps or intersections. So the blue is mindfulness, the kind of rose is social justice, and the light green is capitalism. If you see them as option one, that means totally independent as far as a formula for recovery, all the way down to fully integrated. Now, a lot of folks may see this, and again, I'm not trying to bias. I do teach statistics, so I do have to keep this unbiased, right? So please go ahead and let us know your perception of how you see these particular frameworks. And yeah, nothing's perfect, right? So I did omit some of the majors, and I apologize for that. So this is interesting. Welcome. We're going to have some fun here. So what I'd like, what part of my training as a management scientist was all about frameworks and models. It helps us to organize our thoughts and see the world through an objective view. The three frameworks I'm going to talk about during this talk are frameworks for mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism. and there are several icons associated with them. So let's dive into them one at a time. Let's talk about mindfulness. And to do that, take a listen.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
I want to talk a little bit more about mindfulness. Mindfulness, the dictionary definition is, the second one is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique. This is all about what neuroscience tells us, and that is one of the very important aspects of the DVC mindfulness community and why it's part of the wellness program here at DVC. Because we as human beings, our brains are absolutely fascinating. There's a part of our brain that knows logic, it knows language, but it doesn't know feeling. There's another part of our brain that knows feeling and emotions, but doesn't know anything about language and logic. And when I was taking voice classes, I learned that your voice is halfway between your head and your heart. So you need to use them together. and be aware of where you are. And that's why that location is so important. Now, the funny thing about mindfulness is if we are dealing with people in abstraction, we are more likely to not behave in a very humane way. Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. And one of our challenges, certainly in this current pandemic that we find ourselves, is the people that we're dealing with are more abstract from us. And the more abstract they are, the less human we will be. Our humanity is taxed. And that's one of the things that was found from the Milgram experiments. And if you're familiar with those, let me just talk about them very briefly. It was a situation where a fictitious teacher, as part of the experiment, was asked to give a mild electric shock to a student when the student answered a question incorrectly. And arrayed in front of the teacher was a whole bunch of buttons that would increase the strength of the shock all the way up until, the danger zone. What was found, surprisingly, was that the more remote, the more abstract the student was from the teacher, the higher the likelihood that the shock being administered got more and more and more extreme. This is why, from my way of thinking, this mindfulness gets us in touch with our humanity. We learn techniques to be able, in fact, to control what our body is telling us from the cocktails that get kicked off, recognizing those feelings, and in fact, getting into that higher state where we are above the line, that brain state where we're curious, creative, and truly human. Let's talk about a framework for social justice, and the one that I chose as the icon is Maslow's pyramid. Some people call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I want to talk about it in terms of his pyramid, where the bottom layers of the pyramid deal with our physical needs, our material needs, and the top three layers deal with our spiritual, emotional, and self-actualization needs. This isn't to say that one need is better than another. As a matter of fact, we need to have balance in our lives. And that was one of the premises that came out of Maslow's paper that he wrote in 1943. We must attend to both our material needs as well as our psychological, our spiritual, and emotional needs if we truly are to have a balanced life. The thing that I like also about Maslow's pyramid is it does explain a lot of human behavior. And since societies are made up of humans, it also gives us insights into societal behavior. If we are to have a healthy and just and fair and equitable society, we must be dealing with all of those needs in the entire pyramid. And when we are out of alignment, that's when we have severe problems. Now, one of the things I want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about mindfulness. We get so much information coming at us from the news, so much information that is dividing us. And it kicks off that cocktail of fight, flight, or freeze. And we have to recognize through mindfulness techniques where we are and truly how to get in touch with our true humanity. The nice thing too about the Maslow's pyramid is, let's talk about companies, businesses. They're made up of people. And in fact, the root word of the word corporation is corpus, it means the body. And there are some companies that are fighting for their basic needs. These are what one might call the feudal capitalists, that they are just fighting to survive. And their biggest fear is going out of business. There are other companies that we can talk about that truly are in those psychological needs. Some of them, they want respect. But some of the best companies in the world truly understand the interrelationship and the effect that they have on the world around them. And with that, let's talk about a framework for conscious business. And the best one that I'm familiar with, because it fits with my kind of engineering view of the world, is conscious capitalism. So we're going to hear a talk from Raj Sisodia, one of the thought leaders of conscious capitalism. He is also the author of a book called Firms of Endearment. Very interesting book that talked about those companies that we love, that we have an affection for. And it connects not only what we have an affection for, but how they do in the marketplace.
So we're going to talk about this idea of conscious capitalism, and what does that mean, and how does it work, and why is it essential at this time that we start to think a little bit differently about some of these things. And there's a great myth out there, which I think is the greatest danger, which is that capitalism is a system that elevates the few at the expense of the many, that it's about a few people getting rich. I mean, this was the Marxist critique, right? He's the one who coined the word capitalism. I mean, this is considered a dirty word in many parts of the world. But what is it really? It's just freedom. And what is the impact that it has on ordinary people is, I think, the biggest unknown story here. The percentage of people living in extreme poverty has gone from 90% down to about 10 or 11% in the last 200 years. In fact, it's fallen about 30% just in the last few decades. You look at India and China alone, those two countries, 1 billion people have been lifted from extreme abject poverty all the way into the middle class for that. So we start with some basic premises about business, which is very contrary to the narrative that you hear and read about business out there. Have you ever seen a movie in which the business leader is a hero? Has that script been written yet? And I think there might be one or two, but it's extraordinarily rare. Almost every single movie which has any business guy, the business person is a villain. Now, why is that? I mean, that's just we've come up with this idea that business is about selfishness, exploitation, and greed. And in some cases, people even try to celebrate that. They say, well, the invisible hand of the market takes care of it. Greed is good. No, greed is never good. Selfishness can never be a virtue. Self-interest is essential. Selfishness is not. We have to recognize that business is good because it's based on the creation of value. I don't know of any business that has survived for the long term without creating value. Do you know of any? You have to create value for customers, of course, but also you have to create value for the people who work there. Otherwise, in a free market, they have choice. You cannot force people to work, you cannot force people to buy, you cannot force people to supply to you or invest in you. It is all based on voluntary exchange, which means both sides have to be better off under that scenario. Otherwise, why would they do it? Businesses do not have coercive power. The only institution in society that has coercive power is the government. The government can put you in jail or kill you if you do something that they think is unacceptable. It might be fine over here, but over here it gets you killed. Businesses don't have that. Now, the danger, of course, is when some businesses get in bed with governments, right, what we call crony capitalism, right? That's not really capitalism. Now, you look at Occupy Wall Street and all the angst about capital. Most of it is really directed at crony capitalism. Of course, people would be upset if certain businesses they're not really competing fairly. But that's not what most of businesses are. Business is also fundamentally ethical because, as I said, it's based on voluntary exchange. If you have informed human beings exchanging an illegal commodity willingly with each other, that's by definition ethical. Otherwise, they're not being forced to do it. They are better off, or they believe they are. More than that, I think business is noble. Why would we say that? Because if you think about all those human beings living for all those thousands of years, working 15, 16, 18 hours a day, just to stay alive, just to see another day, that was the condition. We are born with extraordinary, almost divine capacities, and yet most people had no opportunity to explore them. And finally, business, as I said earlier, is heroic because it is the instrument that lifts people out of poverty. Governments cannot lift people out of poverty. There's a great myth in the world today, and has been for a long time, and has done extraordinary damage. Even non-profits and religious organizations cannot lift people out of poverty. They can help, and they're certainly essential and needed in society. But business is the institution that creates wealth and enables people to rise and gives them a sustainable way of earning a livelihood. So there's a different operating model that we're discovering in certain businesses. Business needs to be profitable. Profit cannot be your purpose. That's a radical thing for some people to think about. It's like saying, I need red blood cells in order to live, but that doesn't mean the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. I use that in order to fulfill the purpose of my life. We need profits in order to be able to achieve the impact that we want to have on the world. If we make profits our purpose, we actually create an organization that starts to lose its creative energy, where people are not as inspired as when they are doing something that they feel is a higher purpose. Stakeholder integration, looking at all of your stakeholders and trying to simultaneously create value for everybody, not trading off one against the other, but creating win-win solutions. Conscious leadership, which is about mentoring, motivating, developing, inspiring. It's not military-style leadership and it's not mercenary leadership, it's missionary leadership. It's not about power, it's not about money, it's about service, it's about purpose, it's about people. Those are the most inspiring, most effective, and most transformational leaders that we have. And a culture that is built upon trust and authenticity and caring rather than fear and stress, which is what the norm is at most companies. So this is about why we exist, what we do, who we are, and how we do things. If you do it right, it becomes a virtuous cycle. Right? You have a higher purpose, inspires people, attracts people to come and work there. You do extraordinary things. Customers love it, buy a lot. You get, high returns. You can then invest back in the community, etc. And then, that virtuous cycle continues. This clock doesn't run the other direction. Okay, you can't say we're going to make a lot of money and then do good things with it. No, you have to do the things that create value to begin with. So conscious capitalism is an idea that we believe it works for everybody. It works, for customers, for employees. You have higher profits, you've got lower turnover rates of employees, you have more meaning and purpose, you have fewer levels of management that are needed, there's less legal costs, there's less product returns, all kinds of sort of tactical things. It's a system in which it is possible that everybody can win. And that's what we want. Business is the ultimate win-win game. It's not about winners, losers. This is not sports. This is not a war. This is business where everybody, we create value. That's what business does.
And in fact, this is what many businesses are doing. Now, I talked about Firms of Endearment, the book that Raj wrote many years ago. He is a professor at Babson College. And so, of course, he's got to do evidence-based research. And so he did. He started off looking at what are the companies that people have affections for, not only from a customer standpoint, but also from a supplier standpoint, also from all that multi-stakeholder orientation that Raj had talked about. And only then did he then look at the numbers. And one of the things about numbers is if people are only dealing with the numbers, they're abstract from the people themselves. And yeah, some unfortunate results are going to happen. This is why Raj started off with where the affections are. John Mackey has said, John Mackey is a chairman of the board of Whole Foods and also co-author of Conscious Capitalism, that he believes that one of the greatest forces in business is love. Love comes from trust. Love comes from affection. So here's the performance of these firms of endearment, and maybe a little bit hard to read here, but here is the US firms of endearment over the last 15, 10 years, 5 years, and 3 years as collected data from 1998 through 2013. And then they compare them to the Standard & Poor's 500, a standard index that is often used to kind of track how is the market doing, how is value being created. In the US firms of endearment over that 15-year period, the Standard & Poor's 500 increased over that period 118%. If you invested in the firms of endearment, your wealth would have grown by 1,681%. That pattern is repeated whether we're looking at 10 years, 5 years, or 3 years. And let's look at who some of these companies are. Here are the US publicly traded firms of endearment. And I think if you look at this list, there's some companies that we probably have some affections for. Starbucks, Disney, Costco, Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines, a fascinating company. Their symbol on the New York Stock Exchange is LUV, love. Now, Panera Bread, not publicly traded anymore, they were acquired. And there's a story also behind how Whole Foods was acquired by Amazon. Won't have time for it here, but by all means, it's a fascinating story that you can read when you read Conscious Capitalism. The international firms of endearment, again, these are the publicly traded ones. And you can see some of these companies out there. Unilever, by the way, Unilever, fascinating company. They own a small outfit up in the New England, Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Yes, indeed. So let me bring these frameworks together. And I've grouped these frameworks around the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism. First one being a higher purpose, just cause, then going around clockwise, a multi-stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. The reason why I've aligned the circle and line, the mindfulness, with higher purpose and conscious leadership is that we must be above the line. We must be fully present and mindful of how it is that we're creating value, why we exist. Some people call it mission vision. I find it easier, and I agree with what Simon Sinek had written, to think of it as a just cause. That is, the things that we do because it's the right thing to do. It advances humanity. It creates value across the stakeholder orientations. And among those stakeholders, yes, absolutely, are investors. But there's also employees, customers, business partners, the societies, the communities in which the business operates, and the 6th one being the environment itself. And one of the principles of conscious business is that we're not going to maximize value on any one particular stakeholder. And that was the issue that when I went to business school, I was taught that why does a business exist? To create wealth for the shareholders. That shareholder primacy says that, hey, as long as that the social responsibility of the business rests with the shareholders because they are the ones who are receiving those profits. And one of the things that I've learned from my awakening, the second greatest day of my life, the why I was born, is it's not so. Conscious leadership, as Raja talked about, was all about servant leadership, being outside of yourself, understanding the impacts that you have on the people around you, the people that you have the true honor of leading, inspiring them, removing barriers to their success so that they can thrive. And that conscious culture is the culture within the organization. We cannot legislate morality. We cannot legislate ethics. It's part of our culture. And the strongest ethics are those that are above those physical needs and get us into that spiritual, those emotional needs. And when an organization exists and its just cause is just and sufficiently just and is known, then the people in that organization, they join it because there's an alignment between their personal just causes, their personal ethics, the personal difference that they want to make in the world, and the purposes that those businesses are making in the world. So it all has to function in harmony. Multi-stakeholder, you got lots of people. Conscious culture, lots of people. But the higher purpose, the just cause, the North Star, the reason why we put up with inconveniences, the reason why we're going to sacrifice and bring our whole selves forward for the benefit of the organization and the benefit of the value that is created for those multi-stakeholders. That's what makes the difference, and led by inspiring and inspirational leadership. All right, I'm going to tell a few stories about how these frameworks kind of come together in business. And the first one I'm going to talk about is a company called Grayston Bakery. Grayston Bakery is a social enterprise that was conscious from the start. Founded in 1982 by Bernie Glassman. He is a Zen Buddhist and He was also a rocket scientist, had an engineering degree, a doctorate in engineering, aeronautical engineering. And he was also an entrepreneur. And part of the thing of being that Zen master is that he realized human suffering. And he saw it around him where he lived in Westchester County, one of the wealthiest counties in New York, particularly in a community of Yonkers. Yonkers is a place that really is rather downtrodden. And what he decided to do was to make a difference in the lives of the people in Yonkers. So he started Grayston Bakery. Grayston Bakery, they hire people based only on their willingness or their desire to be a part of Grayston Bakery. They put their names on a list. And when an opening comes up, they are hired into Grayston Bakery as an apprentice. They go through a training period, and then they're working there in the bakery itself. You may know some of their products. Their most famous product is a brownie. And if you are a consumer of Ben & Jerry's brownie ice cream, yeah, it's all coming from Grayston Bakery. But beyond just having people hired and paying them above a living wage, Grayston Bakery is part of a larger organization, the Grayston Foundation. All of the profits from the Grayston Bakery go into the Grayston Foundation. And it provides low-income housing, daycare for the community, medical center for those people with AIDS, and has a path-making program to address poverty, job readiness, life skills training, employment services. You can go out on the internet and find all kinds of stories of employees and people who are teammates there at Grayston Bakery and how it has changed their lives. And they continue to change the lives of the people in Yonkers. They add roughly $11 million every year to the economy of South Yonkers. So that's the Grayston Bakery story. Let me tell you another story about Fledge. Grayston Bakery is one company. Fledge is something called a conscious business accelerator. You may have heard about incubators. Incubators are where entrepreneurs go to have their ideas kind of nurtured and brought to market. You know, they're in an egg, right? They kind of in this nice incubator and they grow. But an accelerator's purpose is to shorten the time between the idea and its successful placement as a going concern. Now, Fledge is a fascinating organization because they only accept people into their accelerator who are conscious from the start, conscious entrepreneurs that have a business idea that will add to and elevate humanity. In fact, Fledge pays entrepreneurs to come to the various centers, one of which is in Seattle, and go through education, training, mentorship to shorten not only the time to launch, but also to enhance the likelihood of launching a successful business. As a business accelerator, they do take a small percentage of ownership in the companies that are in the accelerator, but it's a very small percentage, I think in the neighborhood of, I don't know, about 7% or so. But unlike most venture capitalists who are looking to essentially have a 10-banger or multiply their original investment by 10-fold when they exit and want a seat on the board, Fledge doesn't do that. Fledge has a revenue-based redeemable equity model. That is that as the businesses are profitable, as the businesses launch, they buy back the equity from Fledge, and they buy it back at the rate of 4% of their revenue per year. If for some reason they cease to be in business, no money is owed back to Fledge. It truly is an amazing organization. And I talk about Fledge because we talked about Grayston as a single business. Fledge and other conscious business accelerators are out there spawning more and more conscious businesses. Let's talk about another business. company called Barry Waymiller. I talked a little bit about their chairman of the board, Bob Chapman. And Bob Chapman, if you see their logo, they truly are interested in a better way. They measure their success by the way they touch the lives of people all around them. Their employees, absolutely, well, let's see, Barry Waymiller, I believe, is privately held, but nonetheless, there are investors, their customers, their employees, the communities in which they operate. Barry Waymiller has yet to have an unsuccessful acquisition. And in fact, they have gone into towns where the mills were closing, and they've created jobs primarily because of the culture that they bring in. And talking about that, Bob Chapman had an epiphany when he was acquiring a company. Yes, he was brought up and learned about business as the shareholder primacy. But when he watched the workers as they were preparing to go into work before work actually started, they were happy. They were socializing, had smiles on their face. And when the factory whistle blew, all of those smiles went away and they became almost inhuman automatons. And that really bothered Bob Chapman. And that was the start of his epiphany. The second event in his that he came to grips with was when he had attended a wedding of a friend, and he saw the groom up in front of the sanctuary with love in his heart as the father was walking the bride down the aisle, and he felt the love all around him from the people there in the sanctuary. And he came to the realization that here was a father trusting this relationship to take care of that precious child that he and his wife had nurtured throughout their lives. And he came to the realization that he too, the people that were in his company were in his care, needed to have that same care and regard for their well-being, not only when they're at work, but also when they come home. This is that whole sense of community. Communities take care of each other. When somebody's down, we lift them up. That is that whole social justice aspect that is so important to our long-term recovery. So that's the story of Barry Waymiller. And oh, by the way, not only have they done this with all of their companies, but they created within Barry Waymiller a Barry Waymiller Leadership Institute, where those people that wanted to be leaders, that saw themselves as leaders, could go get training to be truly servant leaders, to be better leaders. And not only did they launch within Barry Waymiller their Leadership Institute, but they realized that they could do far, far more good in the world by having a totally separate subsidiary called Chapman and Company Leadership Institute to offer the training that they provide internally to their employees, to companies around the world and individuals. I had the good opportunity to talk with Matt Waite, one of the principals at Chapman and Company Leadership Institute, and has graciously allowed students of mine to actually participate in their online training. And this is some of the finest leadership training that I have ever experienced. Let's talk about another company, Walmart. I talk about Walmart because here's a company that lost their way. They were founded in 1962 by Sam Walton. And here are some quotes from Sam Walton. Let's see. Oh, yes, here we go. Some Sam Walton quotes. There's only one boss, the customer. He can fire everyone in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending their money somewhere else. High expectations are the key to everything. Outstanding leaders go out of their way to boost the self-esteem of their personnel. And if people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they can accomplish. If you want to be a successful leader, your people must feel you are working for them. You are working for them. Emphasis on the wrong syllable. Not that they are working for you. Now, Walmart doesn't necessarily have the best reputation in the world. They're trying, one can hope, But here you see the cover from their 2020 annual report, and see what it says in the middle. Our people make the difference, and that's a Sam Walton quote. Now, perhaps they're reconnecting with their way, and hope springs eternal. They have been rising in terms of the number of their rating in great places to work. But I have to tell you that, I have to say that the jury is still out, because how a company says and what they actually do, that's the difference. Take a company like Starbucks. No company is perfect. People aren't perfect. They have lapses in their business practices, and that happened in Philadelphia, where some African Americans were arrested for essentially hanging out, and that was absolutely inconsistent with what the ethics, what the morals of Starbucks was. And before things could really escalate beyond all imagination, they proactively flew their entire team out, didn't do a thing, sat down with the people involved. And one of the outcomes from that, as you may recall, was Starbucks shut down every one of their stores and had mandatory training for racial and racial sensitivity. They didn't have to do that. They did it because that was their ethics. That was the right thing for them to do. So I've told some stories about these things in motion in industry. Let me tell you a couple stories about DVC. I talked about the frameworks and how they kind of organize around the higher purpose, stakeholders, conscious leadership, conscious culture. The fascinating thing about the conscious business framework is that it applies not only to companies as a whole, but it also applies to divisions within companies, departments within companies. And the amazing thing is that it's highly fractal. It applies all the way down to the individual. I talked before about the two greatest days in a person's life, the day they're born and the day they discover why. That's the personal higher purpose, the personal just cause. And it was here at DVC that I discovered mine. And it is awakening and enabling a conscious workforce. There's a lot of people who are focused on enhancing leadership skills, enhancing the consciousness of leaders. And I can't touch that world, but what I can touch are the lives of every student who makes a choice to enroll in a class of mine. And I feel that obligation to say that, look, business doesn't have to be the way you think it is. There's a different way, a way that truly creates value. And that awakening causes them to, I hope to realize that they do have a choice as to who they go to work for, who they're going to bring their whole selves for, the difference that they're going to make. And not only does this apply in the profit world, but it also applies in the not-for-profit world. Because I submit to you that the business principles that are there in truly successful businesses are also there within not-for-profit organizations. So as far as this instructor, yeah, I truly understand and believe my higher purpose, my just cause. And I recognize that my stakeholders are the students, the state and local governments. These are again, the funding sources that provide DVC with funds, certainly pays my salary. Is it the same salary I could have gotten in private enterprise? No, it's not, but this is part of my just cause, the things that I will do because it's the right thing to do. Some of the other stakeholders include providers of educational material, publishers, et cetera, and drawing on all the information that's out there. In terms of conscious leadership, I try very, very hard to be that servant leadership, adhering to the 15 commitments of conscious leaders. And these are commitments that have been put forward by the Conscious Leadership Group. And a believer in leaders eat last. This is an inverted pyramid. The reason why I'm there in the classroom is to help students succeed. It's not all about this sage on stage. I care passionately about the success of our students, telling them and describing the things that are not in the textbooks, but hopefully will make a difference in their lives and within that classroom. Within the classroom, my focus is on creating a community of learning, and a community of learning not only within the students, because I learn a huge amount from them. I think we all do. And it's a privilege to work with them, but also within the department that I have the good fortune to be a part of. And I strive very hard to create relationships between our department and the other departments at DVC. You know, sometimes we're just these separate islands, and it doesn't have to be that way, because we are all united here at DVC in the just cause of making a difference in the lives of students. So let me talk about one more thing here at DVC, and that's Piranha Pool. This is something that was an idea from one of the professors in the business department, Charlie Shih. Professor Shih said, okay, well, look, we need to have an environment to inspire budding entrepreneurs to actually acquire some entrepreneurial experiences and be able to serve underserved communities, providing equitable and experiential learning to inspire entrepreneurial thinking. So think of Piranha Pool kind of like Shark Tank, but these are groups of students who come together to try and form businesses. They are provided with mentorship, guidance, leadership. They're provided with a structure for putting together a business plan and all of those kinds of things. And they get to present their business ideas to sponsors sponsors and judges. And there are cash prizes that are awarded for that activity. Some of the stakeholders that Charlie and I talked about were the sponsors, the judges, the prospective students, because Piranha Pool has gotten some absolutely phenomenal press and has attracted and become and is one of the reasons why students come to DVC. The judges' workforce development, that's WFD, startup investors, underserved students here at DVC, family members, the DVC equity and social justice task forces are also stakeholders in the success of Piranha Pool. In terms of the conscious leadership, they mentor teams, they provide skills training, a team inclusiveness coaching. Teaming is not a natural activity per se, certainly if one is not mindful. And within that conscious culture, within the culture of the team, enthusiastic teammates, and one of the most important things that Google learned from studying high-performing teams is the necessity of having psychological safety. So this is why I would like to believe that, or I've come to the realization that these three concepts coming together of mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism truly is a formula for our recovery, not only from economically, but also socially. Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." We have to bring these concepts together. We have to truly recognize the humanity and greatness in each of us and help us all to be the very best that we can be. So I want to offer a concluding story, and I would invite you to join me in this journey. And the story is the one of the singing horse. The story goes something like this, and it's there in many cultures. There once was a thief who was brought before the king, and the king said, "I see you, I've seen you before, you're a thief, you've always been a thief, and you'll probably always be a thief. But you know, I don't want to see you anymore, so off with your head." And the thief said, "Sire, you're right. I've been a thief, I'll always be a thief. And well, but along the way, I've picked up some very, very incredibly valuable skills. And one of those skills is the ability to teach horses and animals to sing. And sire, you could kill me, absolutely. But if you do, that gift will be lost to the world. So here's my proposition to you. I can teach your horse to sing. And if I can, you'll have an extremely valuable horse. And if I can't, well, you're going to kill me anyway, so fine. So here's the deal. If I can teach your horse to sing within a year, you'll set me free. And if you can't, hey, you're no worse off than you are right now. And the king thought about it and said, yeah, that's a pretty good deal. So the thief went into prison, and every day he was taken out of his cell and gives singing lessons to the horse. And every day he would come back into his cell, and all the prisoners and all the guards, etc., would laugh at him. And after a while, he turned to the prisoners and said, wait a minute, let's look at this objectively. What's your situation? Every day you wake up in your dank, dark cell, and you sit there, and every night you go to bed in your dank, dark cell. Now let's look at my situation. Every day I wake up and I go out in the field in the fresh air, giving singing lessons to a horse. And when it rains, we go into the barn where it's nice and warm. And besides, a year's a long time. A lot of things can happen. The horse could die. The king could die. I could die. And maybe the horse will sing. So in this world, a lot of things can happen by bringing these concepts together. And if you join me, maybe the horse will sing. So having gone through this, having spent the last approximately hour with me, I want to ask you a question now, thinking back on the relationships now between mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism as a formula for recovery. How do you see things now? We have to come together, folks. We're all in this together. And I want to conclude with one final activity before we go into Q&A. And that is, on your smart devices, you can share your thoughts about today's talk. Go ahead and type in your thoughts. Good, bad, indifferent. This is an opportunity for us to get feedback. Interesting talk. Come on in, the water's fine. One of the stories I tell during my courses is the difference between involved and committed. In a scrambled egg and chicken sausage breakfast, there's one chicken who's involved, the other one is committed. I'm committed to this journey, and I hope folks are as well. So with that, I'm going to stop the share. And I think we have time for some Q&A.
We absolutely do, Eric. There's a couple comments coming in the chat. And maybe have some time to address
Please.
Thoughts there. And anybody else that has questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat. We do have some time. Thank you.
And John, I had set it up so that people can't unmute themselves. If you want to change that setting, if folks would like to come up on mic, please just raise your hand. Or what were some of the questions, John?
There is one that just came in from Songha. Songha, would you like to unmute and make a comment there?
Oh, I have a long comment.
Please do.
Definitely lots to think about from Eric's talk. And Eric and I have chatted in the past, so he knows some of our concerns from the social justice perspective. I'm just glad that we are having the conversation. I am not sure if my thoughts have changed, but I suppose, at least we have a group of folks who are thinking of the ethics and how we're destroying our planet and how this isn't sustainable unless we change gears.
Indeed. And Sangha, thank you for that thought. It also brought to mind something I saw at the Oscars during Tyler Perry's talk. He was given the Humanitarian Award, and one of his themes coming out of that was, meet me in the middle, because that's where the healing happens. Our ability to have these kinds of conversations, to truly deal with the humanity that is inside of all of us, and creating value and truly being of making a difference in people's lives. That's what's going to pull us out of all of this.
Thank you. Anybody else want to ask? Go ahead and unmute. I've enabled that feature, and you can ask Eric a question directly, or put any comments or questions in the chat.
Eric, if I may speak, this is Ray. Hey, Eric, great job. So appreciated the talk, the philosophy, and it's inspiring, it's motivating. I guess my first question would tie into, how would you conceivably see, if we were to embrace this philosophy, how would you might see the college interdepartmentally starting to work together? How do you see that maybe unfolding? What might be some possibilities?
Ray, thank you so much. First of all, I got to thank you, my friend, for the encouragement that you had given me as I was putting this talk together. Your suggestion of relax, enjoy it, has truly made a huge difference. So I got to thank you for that. We function a lot sometimes. Well, function a lot sometimes. How's that for unequivocal equivocation? As separate islands, separate entities. And I would dearly love to invite our friends from the social justice to be more involved with our business courses. And in fact, the people that have ideas of how to truly bring humanity into our world, these are entrepreneurs too. Come into the Piranha Pool. And beyond that, I see no reason why that entity of Piranha Pool couldn't be a conduit for people into conscious business accelerators like Fledge. Why not? We train, we educate people superbly in this institution. And these people, many of them that come through, are here to make their lives better, to make a difference in their families, and many of them in the world. So let's give them that opportunity to truly bring themselves forward, something that they're passionate about, and provide a pathway to amplify their greatness.
Thank you, Ray, for that question, and Eric for the response. Other questions for Eric? We have a few more minutes here.
Let's see, Jenny had a comment. Jenny, do you want to come up on mic?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Eric. Thanks for the lecture. It was really inspiring. Thank you. A lot to think about. I was speaking with Charlie Shee maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I had mentioned I was writing about the mindfulness community for students. And he jumped in and said that he or your department was considering bringing some mindfulness topics into the business department. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that's a question also more towards Martha and Charlie. As an adjunct, there's good news and bad news. I get to deal with my little corner of the world and do what I think is the right thing to do, the thing that's going to make a difference in the lives of my students. And this is one of the wonderful things about this organization, that DVC. If you feel passionate about something, nobody's going to stop you. We are truly empowered to make a difference in our classrooms. And I'm just so appreciative of the humanity that we have within the business department. that recognize that, yes, this does make a difference in people's lives. There is more to business than the creation of profits. It's what you do with those profits and how it is that you truly elevate humanity and the difference that these businesses make, not only in the lives of their employees, but the communities in which they operate. So think about the difference, for example, when Costco wants to open up a new store versus some other big box alternatives. Some of the big box alternatives, there's a great deal of resistance. That's not so with Costco. Costco pays their people far above minimum wage. And in fact, I know because I work there, they pay overtime on Sundays. And in fact, the chairman of the board of Costco was chastised for paying their people too much. And he was chastised by one of the people from the investment community who comes on the quarterly conference calls. He says, please don't come back. I'm going to run my business the way I think it's the right thing to do. And this is how we have loyalty. This is the difference that we make in people's lives.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Milton, go ahead, Milton.
So, Eric, I love to talk, not being necessarily very supporter or necessarily an advocate of capitalism, but I mean, we're a capitalist society. So if I can throw a philosophical question at you,
please.
Would that be okay? So if we agree that capitalism is based on a free market, that's one of its basic axioms. But we also wonder, how does that correspond to, the Judeo-Christian ethic of original sin that basically we're born, and I'm not saying I subscribe to this, but I think there's a way out of this, and I'm wondering maybe you could find that path. But if we subscribe to Judeo-Christian ethics that, most people are born bad, and we spend a life to do good, or well, I guess we get baptized, whatever, right? How does that juxtapose with the notion of the free market? So if we're free in capitalism to do whatever we want, basically, but the common denominator is that we're basically bad, how can we break out into that benevolence in circumstances that are other than just we have so much we can afford to throw a few pennies or coins or crumbs to the masses? I mean, do you get me on this a little, Eric?
I do, Milton, but let me push back just a little bit. I would say that we are imperfect, and because we're human, we make mistakes. But it's how we deal with those mistakes and how those mistakes impact others. Now, some of the original thinking behind capitalism was first articulated by Adam Smith when he talked about the wealth of nations. But before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wrote about the moral sentiment. And there is a morality in business because humans fundamentally does have a code of ethics. Because we are wired, we succeed as a community. Where we fall down is when we have this lack of trust, stranger danger. Now, are we human? Are we make mistakes? We absolutely are. But one of the things that came out of Aristotle, and when he was thinking about ethics, it is that focus on the good. And this is where too that Maslow's pyramid comes into play, where we have that balance between our material needs and our spiritual, psychological, social needs. For good or for bad, we are social animals. And we function best when we do function as an effective society. There is a saying, I first heard it attributed to the African American community, and maybe came from Africa itself. So forgive me, the etymology is not 100% perfect, but it says something about, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And that's the paradigm that these truly conscious businesses actually operate under. Are there businesses that it's all strictly for profit and they do some horrible things in the world? Absolutely. I don't understand how someone can consciously and enthusiastically go to work for some companies whose products fundamentally kill people, like tobacco companies. Could they become human? Could they become conscious companies? Yes, they could, but their culture and their leadership has to change enormously. Are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. But one of the things about this whole mindfulness stuff is we truly get in touch with this chemical cocktail that's coursing within us, and we make some choices about how we're going to show up. When we make a mistake, we take ownership of that mistake. And one of the things that we talk about in many courses is service recovery. There are several elements to service recovery. The apology, I'm sorry. The taking responsibility, it's my fault. This is what I'm going to do to make it better. And this is what I'm going to do to mitigate the risk that it's going to happen again. You know, are we flawed as human beings? Yes, we're flawed, but it's also part of our humanity. Now, the interesting thing also about the Japanese culture, as I learned it in a business school, was that how the Japanese culture and the U.S. culture look at defects. In many companies, a defect is something to be hidden. It's a mistake. And people get called on the carpet for making a mistake. In many Japanese companies, a defect is an opportunity to improve. And Tony Robbins said, change your perspective and you change your reality. That's what I'm suggesting that we can do here within ourselves, within our college. We as consumers, we have a choice as to who we buy things from, where we go to shop. Do we want to buy some things from companies that get in their supply chain things from factories that employ slave labor? That's why Starbucks and other companies like them are focused on fair trade. We want to have fair trade, paying a living wage to people, and also buying from those coffee providers that truly are conscious and are as beneficial to the planet. This whole advocacy is one of the things that changed Whole Foods in the nature of seafood that they carry. They will now only carry seafood that is sustainably caught. And that was brought to the attention of John Mackey by, in fact, some protesters at their shareholders meeting. But John Mackey, being the conscious leader that he is, says, wait a minute, there's something I'm doing wrong here. Let me learn from this. And he went out and he talked with them. And he learned that, yes, in fact, there were some seafood products that were not being sustainably caught. And he changed what that business was doing. Does that scratch that itch, Milton?
I saw a thumbs up from Milton a few minutes ago. There it is. And I want to thank Carolyn for the comment she just put in the chat. Carolyn, do you want to introduce that? I don't want to take the time to read it, but I very much appreciate that.
It was just, to me, it was what really stood out at the Oscars, and that was the Best Director winner, Chloe, wait, I can't remember her last name. Anyway, made in her speech, and it was about basically the idea that people at birth are inherently good, and that she said that she has always, in all of her travels everywhere in the world, has always found goodness in people. And that's what we should always focus on. So, you know, I think that all of this really plays together, because we are, as Eric said, all in this together. And we really need to just look to find the goodness in all of us, in each other. And
the universe is this wonderful place that even when spit happens, as it says on a baby's bib, we can still find the good. And while we have gone into this isolation through COVID, it really has, in fact, for many of us, caused us to reflect on what is the good and long for those social relationships, and has brought us into focus on that we really cannot go back to the way things were. So let's try a different way. And what I've tried to present to you is a way that not only is a different way, is a human way, is a sustainable way, but it's one that truly is working. When you think about Southwest Airlines, when you go to do some more studying about Greyston Bakery, when you look at Barry Waymiller, these are companies that truly are living these kinds of that intersection between the mindfulness, social justice, and capitalism. And they do come together.
Thank you, Eric, and for everybody for your questions and your comments. I think that's an excellent place to take a pause today and wrap up our session today. And again, on behalf of the entire Academic Senate Council, I want to congratulate Eric and thank you for your presentation today. And I also want to remind everybody that there's a second lecture tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. It is intentionally structured as a longer time period, so we'll have more time following for interactions and chat and questions. So thank you all so much for your time, and wish you a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for all of the energy that you've brought to this, and all of the skepticism. I love it. Without that, we don't change. So meet us in the middle. That's where the healing happens.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. I know you can trim off the end of the recording here, but thank you again for the excellent presentation. I look forward to hearing it again tomorrow and looking at some of that data. And I'm going to have to duck out now. I've got a Senate meeting coming up in a little bit, but thank you, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, folks.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Hey, may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So once the recording is out, would it be okay to share with the public in the community, or is it going to be just a DVC only?
No, absolutely. Last year's talk, for example, and I really did not give Mickey Huff the proper due that he deserves. Yes, it has been published in last year on the DVC website, and I have every anticipation that it's going to be published as well.
Okay.
So it should be available on the DVC website.
Okay, thank you. This is truly one of the best lectures I have attended. Unfortunately, I haven't attended any of the previous faculty's lecture because, before the pandemic, I can't be sitting in one chair and watching the lab with, anytime I could jump to help the tutors or, my fellow, office mate, or could pay attention to the lecture. So this is one of the great things that come out of the pandemic, that I'm attending 2 meetings, still doing my job, maybe not 100%, but attending the lecture, maybe also not 100%, but altogether I got way over 100%. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lily. All right, folks, I'm going to close this off and let you get on with your day.